Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nache from NacheSnow.com. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I have a mosaic artist on today. I can't wait to introduce you guys to her. Before I do, a few housekeeping things. If you did not catch my episode last week, episode 179, please be sure to check it out. It's over at NacheSnow.com/179, and it's how to create a second brain or a personal knowledge management system. If you want to see examples of it, you could check out the video on YouTube, which is also linked in the show notes, or you can listen in audio form. Either way, I've gotten really good feedback on it where it's giving people ideas on how they can organize the loads and loads of information that we're inundated with, along with organizing their thoughts. So be sure to check that out if that's something you're interested in doing this season, digitally getting organized. Also, if you have not already, please sign up for my newsletter over at NacheSnow.com/newsletter. Over there, I share what I'm doing. If it's podcast season, it's the podcast, but I also give my thoughts on productivity. I give my latest reads. And if I've discovered anything, home decor, art stuff, productivity stuff, stationery stuff, I also have an area where I share like my favorite things. So if that's your type of thing, please be sure to sign up. NacheSnow.com/newsletter. Other than that, the drill, my friends. If you have not already, head on over to Apple Podcasts and rate me 5 stars. If you're listening somewhere else like Spotify, please rate me over there. If you're listening on YouTube, please give me a thumbs up. And wherever you're listening, please subscribe. And remember, sharing is caring, my friends. If you think this episode will help someone or motivate someone, please be sure to share it with them. Okay. So I'm excited to bring you guys Kimberly Saunders today. She is a mosaic artist. I happen to be at the National Harbor in Maryland, and they have a store over there called Arts to Nation, and they have tons of local artists. And of course, you guys know, or some of you guys who've followed me for a while, I love glass work, mosaic, stained glass, you name it. Kind of into stained glass right now, even though I haven't had time to do it. But I saw her work and I just thought it was so cool. So, of course, I emailed her and asked her to be on the show, and she graciously agreed. I'll have all her links in the show notes at NacheSnow.com/180, but you can find her at mostalluringelements.com and on Instagram, Most Alluring Elements, if you want to check out her work as we're chit-chatting. But I just love her story because it just goes to show that sometimes we have love for the arts or something as a child, it goes away. And then as we become an adult, sometimes that spark comes back. And then once it does, it's just amazing what can happen. And she also does this on her nights and weekends too. So it kind of just like goes to show like sometimes people decide to pursue something like this full time, but other people find fulfillment in doing it in the fringe hours. So there's no right and there's no wrong, just as long as you're like doing something you love. So anywho, I think as she walks you guys through how she got started, her process, how she stays organized, I think it's just a great inspirational story for anybody looking to get back into the arts and or anybody who has gotten back into the arts, but also might want to know like how did they do their first event. So let's just jump right into it. I cannot wait to dig into your story. But before we do, can you just tell the listeners just a little bit about you and how you got into mosaics?
Sure, I'd love to. I am a single mom, and one of the things that I'm very passionate about is art. So when my daughter was younger, I signed her up for art classes at Biz Arts in Rockville, Maryland.
Mm.
And I would normally just sit on my laptop while she was in classes and I'd do a bit of work or read a book or just something else to occupy my time. And one day while I was sitting there waiting for her, I recognized that they had displayed like artwork from one of their adult classes on the wall. And so it
Mm.
was mosaics. So they had a class where they were teaching adults how to make mosaic mirrors. And I was just sitting there, I was like, oh, this is really pretty. This is nice. I could decorate my home with it. And then so I signed up for a class and I've been hooked ever since. I've been creating mosaics. It started out with the functional art, like the mirrors, what I learned in class, and then I ventured out to different things like the mosaic portraits that are in the art gallery and the mosaic hearts as well.
And then what year was this that you took the class?
Around 2015, I would
Okay.
say. Yeah.
Okay.
So 2015, took the classes and actually took a couple of classes. I also played around with paint pouring. I did a class
Oh,
on that
mhm.
too, but it was actually the mosaics that really stuck. And yeah, and so now I'm here.
Here we are. Well, I
Yeah.
always tell people because sometimes people are like, I need a hobby, or I want to get into art,
Hmm.
or I want to do this, but I'm not sure exactly what it is I want to get into. And I'm like, just take a whole bunch of classes because you
Yeah.
get to learn
Hmm.
real quick what you
What you
like and
like.
you
Yeah,
don't like. And
definitely.
some of the classes could be like a 1 hour, a 2 hour class, right?
Hmm.
Where you're putting succulents together, or you're doing a mosaic
Right.
class, or
Hmm.
what have you. And then if you think that interests you, whatever it might be, then
Hmm.
you might take a 4 week course or a six
Right.
week course, right? You
Yeah.
like
Yep.
graduate.
Yeah, definitely. I've never been one to not try different things. I like to try different things. Like I'll want to build up a skill set. Like I took a flower arranging class because I wanted to
Mm.
decorate my home with live flowers. I really love flowers. So I think for anyone who's interested in either developing a new hobby, finding ways to relax, what have you, just yeah, sign up for classes at your local like art center. I think community colleges also
Oh,
have
yeah.
some classes out there as well. So I think that
Hmm.
all of those are good avenues just to get your feet wet, and then once you find what you're really passionate about, continue to pursue it and build on your craft.
Before you took that class, would you describe yourself as a very artsy person, like in elementary, high school, whatever? Like, were you that person that was always like making stuff?
Yeah, I would say definitely in elementary through high school, I would doodle, draw. I love to color, not so much painting, but definitely drawing and coloring. And I would create different pieces. I give them away as gifts. I'm also like a not a official writer, but I love to write letters, and
Mm.
often I would draw little things on the letters, just add a little bit of flair. I would describe myself as artistic, but when I went away to college, I left it behind because
Mm.
the studies really had me in the books as opposed to doing a bit more exploration around the arts. But I've definitely come back to it now and have always had a genuine love for the arts. Yeah, so I think it's more of coming back to my origins, things that really get me excited
Uh,
at the start of the day.
A lot of times people will take classes and they will fall in love. I mentioned to you that I love stained glass. And so I started taking that like a couple of years ago and I love it. But it
Mhm.
is just a hobby, right? It is
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't sell it, which all my friends are surprised because I usually turn most of my hobbies into businesses. But for
Right.
me,
Yeah.
that one, it's at least for now, just a hobby. But
Mhm.
for you, your hobby kind of has turned into a side hustle. So
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
me how that happened, where you're like taking some classes, you're like, this is my jam. But how did you, as you started to really perfect the craft, what
Mhm.
made you make the switch from hobby to entrepreneur?
So I think just if I think back on it, it was primarily because I saw that there was actual interest in owning the work that I was creating. So
Mm.
I would share it with friends and family, and they would ask, "Oh, wow, could you make one of those for me? And I'll pay you." And it's like, "You will?" It's like I actually started just creating pieces that I enjoyed, right? And then I had my first show at, I think, in Timonium, Maryland. There's like
Mm,
a Maryland craft show, a pretty big craft show, and just got more exposure to other people who also like my work and were
mhm.
willing to pay for it. And I think that was the big driver and aha moment that I had, that this is could be much bigger than a hobby. It could also be an additional source of income. So I started to pursue that avenue, and things are working out, falling into place, getting the exposure, as you mentioned, like having my work in Arts Nation and having my art sold by dealers. It was, I think, a good decision just to primarily do something I love and also make money at the same time.
I want to unpack all that because we've mentioned craft shows, sold at dealers, got your stuff in stores. I'm going to try to channel my listeners, like what they would
Mhm,
want to know. And I'll
mhm,
start with, how did you develop your style? So, folks, I have the links in the show notes, but if you go over to Instagram, Most Alluring Elements, you will see she has a very distinctive style. And so I think at first, people struggle to figure out what their style is. How did you develop
mhm.
your style over time?
It just comes down to practice and actually taking the time out to and be comfortable with failure. At my first show that I mentioned, the art show in Timonium, I had a failed, I think, product. Which was little faces on flower pots, or like glass containers that could
Mm.
hold flowers, like a, let's say, a flower vase. And
Mhm.
so I converted those to what I call flower bots. And so they had little eyes and lips and teeth and really funny and cutesy expressions. And people loved them, but it didn't really take off in the way that I thought it would. But
Mm.
just practicing on creating those then translated somewhat easily to, I like to create portraits of different people, especially people like women with ethnic hairstyle. And I started just playing around with it, and then I found something that really resonated with me but also resonated with other people who admire and enjoy art. So
Mm.
it was really it was a process. I didn't know, that this is the way I should go, but it overall worked out. And I also do believe in just gaining feedback and critiques from others. I initially started out with just my family members and friends, but now Instagram also offers me an avenue to try things out. I create, I post it, and then I look at what was the response to that post. Do people
Mm.
generally like it, or really not so much? So it's a process. With me, I try different things, and really just whatever sticks is what I'll move forward with and continue to nurture.
And to get to your first craft show, because I think sometimes people they start to really gain expertise in whatever craft they're interested in, but they don't know quite when to apply for a craft show. So
Mm-hmm.
what made you feel ready to apply for your first craft show?
It really came down to one, inventory. So
Mm.
I had accumulated or created a good amount of inventory of the functional mirrors, flower bots, also like ornaments. And it was
Mm.
around, I believe, the holiday time, around
Mm.
October was my first show. And
Mm-hmm.
so, since I had that inventory, I did look for a show that wasn't relatively not too expensive, right? So I knew that my inventory, if I sold a certain amount, I could make the money back from the show. So I think it really, for the most part, came down to me having the inventory, being confident in my inventory, and then also wanting to get the exposure to a larger audience to just
Mm-hmm.
see how well those products would do. And a lot of times you really get that exposure at the different events. People will like your content on Instagram, they'll like it on Twitter, but I think you really have more of assurance when you actually see the sales at an
Mhm.
actual event, right? So,
Because people are actually willing to
yeah,
spend
they're
their
willing
hard-earned
to
money.
invest. Yeah.
Right. And so after you did that first craft show, like thinking about the years afterwards, did you end up doing more craft shows? And then how did you end up with a dealer?
I did do other events, not necessarily craft shows
Mm.
though. So I enrolled in a festival in the Bowie area. I've done that twice. And I've also done an event in Baltimore. So
Mm.
I think I did have a moment of reflection based on the craft show, that first craft show that I did. Flower bots are no more. I don't.
They were sunsetted.
that that was sunsetted, and you can find those decorating my family and friends' homes and in my home, but it's no longer something that I invest time in to try to market and produce and get out there. But I use the show to give me an indication as to am I going on the wrong path or right path. And then connecting with the dealer, that was a more of a word of mouth. So one of my close friends commissioned me to do a piece for her mother.
Mm.
And after I delivered the piece, she shared that piece with someone who she knew, and her acquaintance knew the art dealer. And
Mm.
so I connected with her, really had a good connection with her, supported her in the curation of one of her newsletters, and
Mhm.
also sold some of my pieces through that relationship. And we're still connected today. And she's actually the person, she was at the National Harbor and she texted me and she was like, "Hey, have you heard of this place?" And it was
Mhm.
Arts Nation. I was like, "No," because I hadn't been to the National Harbor for whatever reason. I don't know why. I hadn't gone. It's a beautiful place. But yeah, she mentioned Arts and Nations to me, and I think that this is a really good space for you to have your artwork. And so I applied, I was accepted, and I'm there today.
So she serves as she finds like opportunities for you and highlights those opportunities. Does she also act as a broker, or is it really like she's really letting you know, hey, you need to get into this gallery, you need to apply for this? What's, yeah, her role? How does she help?
I haven't contracted or I'm not in an agreement with the broker.
Mm.
So when we initially connected, she featured my work in her newsletter, and she was acting as a broker at that point in time.
Mm.
But going forward, I think she just loves my work, and so she'll just text me out of the blue,
Oh, wow. That's
say,
nice.
"Hey, have you thought about doing this?" Or just she's really looking out. I think
Yeah.
I think that that's just who she is. She's not expecting to be compensated or benefit from it in any way. She's just helping me because she believes in my work, I think.
One thing that I love talking about on the podcast is productivity, organization type stuff.
Hmm.
So, curious for you, as your sales started to pick up through the years,
Hmm.
how did you navigate that? Did you have a system so you knew how many pieces there were and then how much things are? And then did you have a way of tracking them? Because I think sometimes, especially as artists start to get more business, they're like, what do I have in inventory?
Hmm.
How much am I
Hmm.
charging? What does that organization look like for you?
So for me, I'm using spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets. I know the number of items that I have in total. I know the location of those items. So some things are in Arts Nation, whereas other things are on my website. I know the colors that are represented in those pieces as
Mm.
well. Although no two pieces are exactly alike because of the nature of the process. I do want to have a variety of the different colors and materials in my artwork, so I keep track of that as well. So Excel spreadsheets or numbers for any Mac users. And then I also use Trello.
Yeah.
It's like a project management software, but I'll have the tasks that I need to do on an administrative level, like either additional training courses or make sure I write a newsletter or things like that. And
Mm.
then I also have a backlog of the different types of pieces that I want to make. If I already have X number of hearts out there in the different colors, then maybe I'll create a portrait instead. So I have a backlog of the things that I'm planning to create. Not all things because I don't want to be overly prescriptive, but I
Yeah.
have an idea of those things that I should start planning to put together based on my inventory.
It just warms my heart that you have a newsletter because I always tell people y'all need a newsletter because if social
Yeah.
media go down, you gotta be
Mhm.
able to
Mhm.
talk to the people.
That's
And
true.
for your newsletter, is it mostly you just sharing new work? What type of content do you share with people?
And I do have to admit I haven't been doing very well on my newsletter this year. But I have put one out there, or a few out there. But I do need that's one of my to-do items to be a bit more consistent with the newsletter. But normally I'll just share anything that's new. So sometimes it's artwork, other times it's a new payment feature on my website. So I
Mm,
want people to know for those who need payment plans in order to be able to afford like some of the larger pieces. I just want
mm.
everybody to be able to purchase my art if they're passionate and they love it and not have to worry so much about the that one-time bulk expense. Any number of things. It's really all about sharing my work, sharing additional features on my website or announcing new partnerships as
Mm.
well so people know where to find my work.
I love that. And it's interesting because that is a perfect segue to one of the other questions I wanted to ask you,
Mhm.
which is, it's interesting with arts, and people say arts and crafts, right? And
Mm,
there are some things that are very artsy, but more on the crafty side, right?
mhm.
And they'll be still good quality, but maybe lower in cost.
Yeah.
Then you have something that is art,
Mhm.
where it somehow crosses that
Right. Yeah.
threshold, right? And I feel like when I look at your stuff, it is art, and so
Mhm.
I'm just
Mhm.
curious: would you consider that what you do as art, and are you marketing it as art? And is your dreams one day to maybe go into museums and do like custom pieces for people? So just kind of
Mhm.
like curious, like how do you define your work?
I do define it as art. If you look on my website, you'll see different types of art.
Mm,
So some things are strictly art, like the portraits and the hearts. So there's
mm-hmm,
no additional functionality to them. Whereas other pieces, I don't view them as craft, it's more
mm-hmm,
of functional art. So like a
mm-hmm,
mirror, I categorize my more work as art, and then I do have some pieces that are functional art as well. So around Christmas time, I like to do Christmas ornaments. So I consider those as craft, and so they wouldn't necessarily be in the art gallery, but I'll place them on my website because I do have clients who almost every year they're buying the ornaments because they like to give
mm.
them out as gifts. So, I want my clients to still be able to do that. But that isn't something that I would market as art or have in the art gallery. It would just be for my website.
What people don't realize sometimes is sometimes there are people who appreciate art,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's other people who are like, "What? How much does this cost?" And it's look, do you know how
Right.
many hours went into this?
Hours. Yeah,
Blood, sweat, and tears. You trying to get this for
absolutely.
$20, and it took me 40 hours to create. You crazy, right? And
Right. Yeah,
so,
definitely.
how did you get comfortable with pricing your art accordingly? Like really
Mm-hmm.
truly making sure that you are charging what it's worth.
I would say, I think, like you mentioned, I know what went into it. So I know that each little piece of glass that you see on those pieces, I had to hand cut. As you mentioned, sometimes I get nicked by that
Literally
glass, and
blood.
For the most part, I have a formula, I have a system for how I price the different items. So, like a mosaic portrait, I'll take into account the width and the length, but I will also account for the labor,
Mm,
how complex it is to put the piece together, how much the materials cost for those pieces, and it's really a formula that I use. And now that I've tested and tried the formula and the different markets, I'm comfortable pricing my pieces now. I didn't start out that way,
mm,
but it's something that I've developed over time, just getting a sense for what other mosaic artists that who have works similar to mine. I think that's key. What their price points are,
mm.
and not necessarily matching their prices, because I also take into account their experience as opposed to mine. So I think having a system and then
Mm-hmm.
allowing it to be repetitive, test it out over time. And then if you're making sales but not making too many sales, if that makes sense, because sales really isn't the litmus test as to whether you're pricing appropriately. If all your inventory flies off the shelf in a single day, more than likely you're not pricing it. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, what people sometimes don't know and appreciate
Mhm.
is all glass ain't equal and glass isn't cheap, right?
Right. Yes. Yes, definitely. Going back to the width and length consideration, complexity, there's all in the material price. Let's say a flower mosaic using white glass as opposed to pink glass
Mm-hmm.
is going to be priced differently because pink glass is really expensive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, definitely. But I think if I'm there, I could definitely explain that. If I'm not, then I understand why it would be a question. But I think you still have to price it appropriately.
And
Yeah,
people
as
who
a
know, right? Like people
right,
who
yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
art, even if they
Mhm.
don't know all the things, when they see something, you can tell, okay,
Mhm.
this is handmade art, right? And
Yes.
this is an artist that is using good materials. You assume like everything has been accounted for and it's being priced appropriately
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's also about your creativity too. That's what you're
Mhm.
charging for also, right?
Definitely.
Which
Yeah.
is
Yep.
how you decided to put it together. And like you
Mhm.
definitely, I can't wait till people see your work because you definitely have a very distinctive style. And that's what people
Thank
are paying
you.
for too, right? Like to have your unique art in their house.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping that when people see it, they can see how much time went into it. But I think again, it's still like when you mentioned that you're a stained glass artist, I knew instantly, oh, well, okay, she understands what goes into every piece that I'm making because the process is very similar. The materials are very similar. I don't necessarily think folks always know that, to your
Mhm.
point, but I'm hoping that's a takeaway for them when they look at the work and just see how I like using materials where depending on your viewpoint,
Mm.
the colors may change a bit and the light will
Mm.
reflect and dance off the surface. So I'm really intentional about that, and I'm hoping that comes through in my work when people see it.
Look, I contacted you. I was in that store. I think I
Yeah.
might even have this little video footage. If I do, I'll make sure to put it on Instagram the week
Oh,
this
thank
goes live.
you.
Because, yeah, no, I was just like, wow. I was
That
in there
means
with
a
my niece and we were
lot.
like, this is beautiful.
Thank you so much. That's really sweet. And again, it means so much because I know that you are a fellow artist, and I've seen your work, which I love. I really appreciate you saying that.
So you have the hearts, right? And that
Yeah.
is a large amount of your work is like these.
Hmm.
The only way I can describe it to the listeners is so imagine a mosaic art within a frame, but each heart is a different color. Some hearts have roses in them, hearts
Hmm.
within a heart. There's one with a zipper. You have all of these different styles. I see one with kind of a chain and a lock. So what made you gravitate to the heart?
I never before considered myself a heart person, right? I don't have any jewelry or any other artwork with hearts on it, but it was a Valentine's Day, and by this time, I've been creating mosaics for a considerable amount of time.
Mm,
And with every piece that I create, especially the portraits and the hearts, there's a lot of feeling that go into them.
mm,
Like the hearts with the zippers is about getting to the point in a relationship where you're comfortable with unzipping your heart, exposing it a
mm,
bit without too much fear or anxiety because you've reached that point in the relationship where you're comfortable. And I would have to say the hearts came about from a bit of
mm,
longing to have that type of, and for me, romantic relationship.
mm,
I know love takes on different forms. There's familial love, there's friend love, but for me, the driver behind the hearts was really romantic love. And
mm,
so I'd have to say my longing for that is what was the driver for the creation of the hearts. And so
mm.
each one is a different emotion or feeling that I'm going through at the moment or something that crosses my mind and I think about it. And so I just put it into the hearts.
Love it.
Thank you.
Okay. So before I get into the wrap up questions,
Hmm.
just a couple more things. One, your studio, right? So
Hmm.
where you work. And I think this is important because I think people think they have to have this super fancy, decked out studio.
No.
So, yeah, can you tell the people?
So my studio also is my laundry area. When I purchased my home, I told my realtor at the time that I really needed a space where I could create. So
Mm,
I was looking for something that was like an unfinished basement. Now, with my current home, the majority of the basement is finished except for the laundry area.
mm,
It's a concrete floor. The ceiling isn't finished. I just have the washer, dryer, and then the other utilities in that room.
mm.
I was thinking this is a okay space. I'm not too thrilled that my washer and dryer was down here because it gets a little bit of grout and pigment and things like that on it. But so no, it isn't my ideal space, but it's working for now, and I do have plans to make some changes this year towards the early next year just to get into a larger space, still in my
Mm.
home though, right? I'm just gonna repurpose other rooms to have a dedicated space.
I heard that. So
Yeah.
you hear that, people? Go out, buy some of her art so she can deck that space.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that is the plan. But yeah, to your point, I don't think you have to have everything together to get started.
Mm,
You make adjustments as you move along. So now that I know, yeah, this is what I want to do, investing time and material
mm.
to do these things, now I really need a dedicated space so that I don't have to clean up between creation. Everything can stay exactly in its place, and I can still do other things like wash and dry my clothes.
And then just curious because for my listeners, I know some are out there and maybe they've started a mosaic class or a
Mhm,
watercolor class or an oil class or woodworking class, printmaking, who knows,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And they have all these ideas and people love what they do. And they're just like, but will anybody buy this? Should I start like a side hustle? Any
Mhm.
advice for those people that might help them on their journey as they try to figure out what to do next?
My path, I think, was more so if friends and family are interested in buying it, then other people more than likely will be interested as well. Because
Mm.
your family and friends, they're going to be critical and very honest. So if it was trash, they'd be like, Kim,
Mm.
this is trash, okay? But since they liked it and they were interested in buying it, I think just the initial interest, and even if you're not sure about it, you can always, there are constant little pop-ups all over
Mm.
the place where the entrance fee is fairly minimal. So you can start out there, submit your work for pop-ups, and if you're selected, you'll have an opportunity to try it out, right? And then to
Mm-hmm.
see whether the market says, hey, this is something you should continue doing, or if the market says maybe you need to work on a bit more, like in my case, right? And then keep putting it out there. I think, why not? It's
What?
yeah, like why not?
Exactly. No, I 100% agree. I forgot how that saying goes. I'm terrible with sayings. It's something like, you never missed the shot you never took, or something like that. Do
Right.
you know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
yes. I heard a really good one. It is, don't let someone else benefit from your doubt. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt, this phrase was, or saying was, don't allow someone else to benefit from your doubt. You want to get out there, look at every new exposure as learning. Don't be afraid to fail.
Mm.
No one buys your content, then okay, go back into the lab, do a few
Right.
tweaks, put it back out there. If it's something that you truly enjoy, you're passionate about, and you've had some indication that it's something that people will gravitate to, then give it a try.
You guys heard it yet again. Okay? So, people out there, get to it. Get to it.
No time
So,
like the present.
so, a couple of wrap up questions for you. How do you stay organized? Any tools, software, techniques that you would recommend? I know you, of course, have already mentioned spreadsheets and Trello, but is there anything else that comes to mind that helps you stay organized?
I think the spreadsheets and Trello are the things that keep me organized with mosaics also
Mm.
because of the sheer amount of material that I need to create a single piece. I love like plastic containers. Yeah, so I'm constantly in Michael's, like buying little containers so I can, because it's, and I'm sure you have the same issue. You have certain colors,
Mm-hmm.
texture, and so on, and you want to keep them separate, otherwise you'll be hunting forever.
Oh my
Um,
goodness, yes.
yeah, and also like having a system where your containers are clear so that you can see
Mm-hmm.
what the contents are. That's really important as well. So, yeah, just a bunch of plastic containers with lids, and I also have a container, a large drawer, a plastic drawer set with different sections so I can coordinate and organize glass sheets by color. So,
Oh, nice.
um, yeah, so everything I try to keep it separate, organized by color. Hit or miss. The glass sheets are definitely by color. Some of the other like stones and other materials like that, I keep all the stone in one bin. I've got somewhat of a system. I don't know that it's and up to par with a professional organizer.
For sure.
But
Hey, it sounds good to me because
uh-huh.
I'm still trying to figure out what to do with my sheets. I have like
Mhm.
my sheets of glass separated by newspaper because I haven't found like a bin or whatever. I was looking on Pinterest and other places to see how I could store it because there's nothing that's
Mhm.
like made for storing glass per se. So you're trying to
Right.
look at things
Yeah.
that could kind of do the job, but it sounds like you
Mhm.
found at least some bins that work, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah. Michael's, they have I can send you the info and maybe you
Yeah.
can add the link if your listeners are interested, but they have really good containers that are see-through. So if you're working with any material where you need to be able to see the color and somewhat of a texture of the contents inside, they have really good options.
And do you have a hobby?
Say reading is my
Oh.
hobby, but recently I've switched to audiobooks
Mm.
because I'm working with my hands a lot. So having them hold a book really
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work that well. But I do enjoy reading, so I'll pick up a magazine for something quick, but I haven't read a novel in like years since I've started creating. Instead, I listen to it while I create.
Hey, I consider that reading. I am on
Okay.
Libby where I get the stuff from the library, their Audible books,
Hmm.
and then I'm also on Audible. I can audiobooks like crazy.
Yeah, I do. I download quite a bit.
Did you have any ones that you recommend that come to mind? I'm catching you cold with that, but wasn't sure if there was a book where you're like, oh yeah, your listeners should check out X.
I do have one. One that I think is really good for artists is Art Money Success
Oh, I've never heard of that
by
one. Yeah.
Maria Brophy.
Mm.
And I apologize if I'm butchering her name.
I'll put
But
it in
I
the show
found really
notes.
good tips in her book. And there are things that I haven't necessarily implemented, but they're just in the back of my mind that you do need to. One of the things that she recommends is that you take a traditional approach. I'm not actively pursuing any particular venue for my work. What she recommends in the book is that instead, if like you're creating art that features horses, get out and go to a horse race or things
Mm.
like that. Go to the Kentucky Derby, mix and mingle with people who are there who also love horses more than likely. And then you'll start to make those connections, networking, and get your work out there. Because a lot of shows that may interest you will also have a vendor section and you can apply and get your work out there. She's got really interesting methods for how to earn money from your art. And
Yeah.
so I think it's a really good book for your listeners to pick up if they're interested.
For sure. I'm going to definitely add it to the show notes so you guys
Okay.
will know everything will be in the show notes. And I feel like my listeners,
It.
just like I do, love a good business book.
Mhm.
so,
Yeah, this
so,
is a it's a good one. Still implementing her things that she's recommended,
but
but
good.
definitely a good read and a lot of really good content.
Okay. No, great. And then if the listeners are like, okay, where do I find Kimberly? Because I want to follow her and I want to go to any art, whatever she's having.
Hmm.
Where can they follow you and
So,
find you?
so my website is Most Alluring Elements, and any of the events that I have upcoming, I'll place and post an announcement there. And on my website, they can also find a link to Arts Nation and when I'll be there as well. Other than that, I'm on Instagram under the same name, Most Alluring Elements, X, formerly known as Twitter. On there and also Facebook. But I post to Instagram any new work that not all my work will make it to the website because some things are going to go directly into Arts Nation.
Mm,
But Instagram will have all of my work there, and hope your listeners will go and check out
check
my
it out.
website, follow me on Instagram, and stay in touch.
Yes, Kimberly, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for
Same
sharing your
here.
story.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, what did I tell you guys, right? Oh my God, Kimberly was absolutely amazing. It's so funny. I wish you guys could see her card. I have her card in front of me as I'm talking right now, and it's so cute. I just love her creativity when it comes to mosaic art. Even though I'm into stained glass right now, I feel like I want to take a mosaic art class after looking at her stuff again. But anywho, I hope you guys just feel inspired. I hope that the tips that she provided will help you in whatever your journey may be. And if you think that this would be motivational and inspirational for someone that you know, sharing is caring, my friends. Please share this episode with them. Of course, anything that we mentioned in the podcast can be found in the show notes over at nachesnow.com/180. Also, remember you could sign up for the newsletter over there. So I love to stay connected with you guys and share all the things. So remember to do that. And if you love this podcast, remember to head on over to Apple Podcasts and rate me 5 stars. You listen on Spotify, please give me a rating. YouTube, a thumbs up. And wherever you're listening, please subscribe. All right, I hope you guys have a beautiful week. And I will chit chat with you guys next week. Have a good one. Bye.